Hello everyone, today is Wednesday, the 6th of September 2017. It is block height 483,896, blazing through those blocks. Bitcoin interprets statism as damage and roots around it. That's a quote from Michael Krieger here on Twitter. A couple of people sent me this actually after yesterday's show. Apparently you were really happy with the philosophy angle. I'm just going to go straight into it today. Don't need to introduce my co-hosts because you know them already. Shinobi, Mr. Hoddle. What's up with Segwit? I mean, I guess we have to just thank the Silbert agreement, right? The Silbert Accord. That was the
Yeah, I mean,
summit.
dude, what would we have done without all these corporate suits getting together in a private room and making decisions for all of us? Am I right?
You know what I'm saying? Well, that's pretty much how it happened. So I'm sure there isn't another perspective. Hint, hint. Unless you give me
Oh
one.
yeah, there's totally another perspective. That was a totally selfless thing. That they spent sleepless nights doing surveys, trying to get opinions from the community, get the people's opinion, and then they acted.
Well, I heard a rumor that the Gavin Andreessen was actually Shaolin Fry because we did find a quote from an interview that he did where he basically, he was talking about the monopolies, and we can go more into it tomorrow, but he said that the blockchain is really as advertised. It really is controlled by the people who are using it and really is designed to be more efficient, more fair way of sending value over the internet, end quote. And I feel like, listening to a lot of these players in the industry, we're seeing this shift in narrative where it's all about the story and who controls the perspective. And this was a particular glossing over of history that you found that was actually voted up. There was maybe some hints of upvoting, brigading on our Bitcoin. And do
Yeah,
you
to
want to?
me, it very much looked like that. It just popped out of nowhere, flew up to the top of the front page with hundreds of upvotes, like I think an 88% upvote ratio, and there was only like 16 comments in it. Like
Yeah.
I've never seen this Block Geek site before. Like it just I mean, when you go onto these social media platforms, like you really have to be cognizant of little cues and tells like that, because it really is trivial if you're willing to throw money or time at it to game these kinds of things. But I found it very suspicious, and I called it out as such in the comment sections and quickly slid off the front page. But aside from that, though, it is a pretty nice technical breakdown of a lot of the things involving Segwit. It goes into the technical structures involved, the logic behind it. But really, the most interesting things were, one, most of the material were lifted from an article by Aaron van Wirdum. And that's not too out of the ordinary. I mean, he's one of the most competent writers out there as far as getting into the nitty gritty of things. But the other interesting thing is there is no mention whatsoever of the user activated soft fork on this site, even though the source material it was lifted from went very in depth into the history, the people involved, the rationale behind the user activated soft fork. It's like an attempt to use this delivery of technical explanations as a way to just kind of shoehorn in a whitewashing. Like the user activated soft fork, it's not a thing. Don't think about it. It never happened. This isn't. We got Segwit entirely due to the New York agreement, and obviously we have to hard fork in 3 months or about 2 months now in November. And like this is just very subtly manipulative. I mean, it's attempting to present technical information to educate people alongside a complete rewriting of history. Like it's not even a month after Segwit is activated. Like the user activated soft fork, like this was a very pivotal point in history. This was the first time that you've really seen the users who are usually very dispersed, very opinionated in a lot of different ways, really stand up together and go, no, we're the ones in charge. Like we make up this system, we define it. And so many of the parties out there nowadays are just trying to completely erase that from the history books and just take control of that narrative. I mean, I'm kind of rambling, but a last note, if anybody here watching has ever seen Ray Poliard on Twitter, this is a story war. This entire system is totally voluntary, and it cumulatively coalesces out of the actions of individuals. And ultimately, we make the choices, we decide how we act based on the information or the narratives that we're presented with. And this is a war over that narrative, a war over that story. And they're attempting to just erase one of the most important parts of it, in my opinion, completely from that book.
It's such a cliche now to talk about Stalin and airbrushing people out of history, but I fear that this is actually dangerously the direction that we're going, particularly with social media. And I have more to say about this, and I will over the coming days. I'm still sort of gathering materials and gathering my thoughts, but framing the narrative and couching the perspective, the way you crop a photo really just changes the meaning of that image in the mind of the perceiver, the person looking at it. And I think what I see happening a lot is people deciding on the outcome they want and then picking conveniently the pieces of the narrative they want to fit that road, to fit that destination. And rather than approaching the world with an open-ended curiosity and a constant kind of two-way testing. And I think what's happening now is really like an identity is forming around people that maybe had opinions who were quiet on the street or were anonymous, who are now revealing themselves, are coming into the light, which is what Hannah Arendt said identity was, in essence, that identity is a coming out from the shadows and into the light. That's what your identity is based on. And I see a lot of people now, like Shinobi, maybe Mr. Horu, who like so angry with what they see portrayed in the mainstream media that they want to have some kind of identity online, a coherent identity that you can resolve, that you can go back to and see a consistency in the narrative. And I think a lot of people are distorting the history and they're saying, well, UASF never happened, and it was the Silbert Accord, then the New York Agreement that got this through, and the businesses coming together. And when you go through the quotes of the people that supported that initiative and you look back at what they said in 2016, 2014, it's like a switch flipped. And they totally changed their opinions on it to suit whatever agenda they had at the time.
Yeah, when I talk to some of these hard forkers, big blockers, I kind of just stick to facts. Fact number one, BIP 148 was created and it was destined to activate Segwit on August 1st. Fact number two, after 148 was created, you have BIP 91 that was created to work with BIP 148. Then BIP 91 activated BIP 141. That's what activated Segwit. There is no, if you on your node, what you see is BIP 141 is activated. That's it. There is no handshakes, no agreements, paper signatures, none of that activated Segwit. What activated Segwit in the end of the day was BIP 141. And you can't argue with that. That's something that's not debatable. I mean, it's what it is. And anyone that tries to pretend that this didn't happen is just lying. They're liars. And I mean, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, the people control the network, not an arbitrary group of, businesses or an arbitrary group of miners. The miners mine the blocks, but the users validate those blocks together. They propagate them, and they live in an ecosystem.
We give it value. One of the things that I think like people really don't appreciate the subtle nuance of is proof of work does not mean anything without software to define it, without that software to ascribe meaning to it, to place it into a larger informational system, to give it context, which is what allows it to have value in the first place. All it is just a string of numbers. That's it. It does not inherently mean anything on its own.
More to the point, and I want to give everyone who's watching this a way of self-verifying this, because I don't want us to be making claims that are just opinions. I want people to be able to test what we say. With the proof of work system, it takes advantage of something called the avalanche effect in the cryptographic hash functions, or the SHA secure hashing algorithm, in the sense that it's difficult. What you want is a number that is difficult to produce, but easy to verify, trivial to verify. You want the miners to be expending lots of energy, a thermodynamic process known as proof of work, which is used to test their honesty. Because at the same time, they're witnessing transactions and they're placing them into the blocks, they're broadcasting those blocks, and with it, the proof that they did some work. And then that's only half the process. The other half of the process is that they will not be able to claim their block reward, currently 12.5 Bitcoins per block, until the nodes on the network have received the proof of work, have verified the transactions, and verified that that number, that nonce, that value that they worked so hard and spent so much energy to produce is valid, using their own CPU, using the code that they downloaded and hopefully vetted and looked at and inspected. But it's based on the same open source protocol that everybody gets. And people need to understand that mining is only half the story. So that's half the process, is doing the work and distributing the block. A network of nodes then needs to accept that and validate it. If you're saying that these validating nodes that give you the reward, that propagate your block across the network and allow you to issue yourself with that block reward so that you can make money back on your electricity. If you're saying that those need to be a conglomerate of large $20,000 node infrastructure, whatever, the cost of setting these up. In other words, it's just industry or state and industry maybe together that run it. Well, what's the point? Shinobi, you put it best. What did you say earlier in the Mumble chat? You said, like, no, we shouldn't be auditing, et cetera, et cetera.
It's like, why would we need to audit the Federal Reserve or the big investment funds or banks? I mean, just trust them, guys. All the numbers add up. Why should we bother checking, right? And everything's going to work out. Who cares?
Yeah. What's the point in having a blockchain? Just use a SQL database. No, there's no point. You may as well, if you're saying that people, that anyone out there should not have the ability to verify that all the transactions that you said happened overnight when they were sleeping or while they were away, or just whilst they're on the network itself and they're too busy to see it. If you're just saying, don't let them check it. Come on, guys, trust us. Trust me. Don't worry. Yeah, I'll look out for those. I'll look out and make sure these computations all add up. You just carry on with your day. You're just a pleb. You're a plebeian. You're nothing. You're small. And you don't matter. And you just want the convenience. You don't want the coffee, right? You don't want to have to go through the process of like downloading all of the TXs and making sure they all hash and making sure the Merkle root is true.
Yeah, like why bother to learn math or science or how things work? Just trust us. Just keep your nose stuck to your screen and push the buttons we tell you to push. I mean, you'll get your coffee at the end of the day, right?
Fun fact: the only reason that things like maths and English were taught properly in English schools was so that people could go get jobs working in the factories. The factory owners demanded that people knew these certain skills like reading and writing so that they could write reports for the head of industry, right? For the captains of industry, the people that were there building this industrial revolution. But people were not taught for their own edification, for their own self-learning, for their own, hopefully to turn that information into knowledge and that knowledge into wisdom, which is really a self-knowledge, right? How do I understand myself, given my understanding of the environment around me, so that one can grow and mature and expand one's understanding of the universe that they find themselves in? I think sometimes that can be very frightening.
I also just want to say that, there's a lot of people saying Bitcoin is, have a Swiss bank account in your pocket. And I don't think people realize, or at least not many, that unless you're connected to a trusted node, you are trusting that SPV wallet, that light wallet that you're connected to validate your transactions. So unless you're running a node or you're connected to someone that's running a node, you don't have a Swiss bank account in your pocket. You have basically, you know,
a membership card to somebody else's.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. I mean, nodes is what creates this network. That's what Bitcoin is. It's a bunch of nodes that are talking to each other. And I mean, unless you're running one and you're not really using Bitcoin. I mean, now if you're a hodler like myself, you're not transacting Bitcoin, then I understand you don't need to run a node. But if you're using Bitcoin, if you're actively using Bitcoin and you're not connected to a trusted node, you're not really using it.
Yeah, I
You're
love
just
that quote,
making use of
Shinobi.
the service that others provide. But yeah, go ahead, Chris.
What did you say? You said you had a really good quote about membership. Say it again.
Oh yeah, if you are not connected to your own node or running your own node, you don't have a Swiss bank in your pocket. You have a membership card to somebody else's.
Very good quote. I love that a lot. And just to sort of point out to people, it's very easy to create a Potomkin village on the internet. It's very easy, just trivial really, to spend a few dollars and, like, you know, you can buy, you know, live stream viewers, you can buy likes, upvotes on these Twitter polls, for example. Like, they're just, you know, look at this, like $99 get, you know, 500 live viewers, or 100, you know, you get 1,000 live viewers, 500 people chatting. You can create whatever illusion you want simply by going to a search engine and looking this shit up. Blackhatworld.com. Love this, like SEO, like where you can like share tips. And what these SEO people do with their lives is they basically go around looking for new emerging platforms. And then when they find one, they start studying it, and they look at the metrics, and they look at how they're calculated, and they look at the surfacing algorithms. Like, how does, like, getting on the front page of YouTube, for example, really, really important for discoverability. So, you know, they look at, like, well, okay, how's the algorithm working? They back test it. They set up an account. They publish a video. They write a bot. The bot clicks on the like button lots of times from lots of different IP addresses, and they just look to see, okay, how did that got onto the front page? So whatever I was doing, this was the right thing. It was the like button that did it, or it was the favoriting that did it, or it was the sharing it on YouTube with that special URL at the end, so that they know that you're the same person. All of these different dynamics, and what you can do with that, once you have it, once you bootstrapped yourself and you've created this, you know, fake it till you make it kind of mentality, is you get this enormous audience, and then you are responsible. You're responsible because you've got this big platform, you've got this big sort of megaphone. And so people that are brigading on our, you know, Reddit, on our Bitcoin, our BTC, all these different outlets where we now get our media, let's be careful that we're not recreating the monster in our own image, the same monster that I think this industry tried to expel, which was the mainstream media, and having this fountain, this hydra of information. I just want to be careful without casting any aspersions or anything. I'm just saying that sometimes it's easy for us to detect, you know, inauthenticity when we see it. We know something isn't quite right. That doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, doesn't sound right. I think deep down in us, we all know what the truth is. All right, next topic. We've got segregated witness is coming to green address, and we're seeing quite a few places now, keeping on this theme of Segwit, that are adopting. A couple of exchanges are implementing it, as I happen to know. And if we see, like Charlie Shrem said, if we start to see a large adoption of Segwit, you know, activation on the network, we could maybe avoid potentially the Segwit 2x hard fork.
I mean, that would be the goal to shoot for.
Indeed.
Also,
and we have,
I mean,
what's this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say someone sent a transaction for 1 cent today using Segwit. It's unfairly cheap. So
that's very unfairly cheap.
Yeah, we might need to fix that.
What happens if the miners go on strike? What happens if they like form a union and then go on strike, Mr. Toddle?
They don't get
then
paid.
we fire them. We fire them and replace them. I mean, that's the beauty of the incentive structure, Chris. If one miner wants to go on strike, well, hey, guess what? That's more money for the rest of them. If he goes around trying to convince people to go on strike, and him being ready to do that means they get more money, why would they follow him? yeah, okay, we'll do it. Not.
Well, anyone else, like, this is the thing. It's also, Bitcoin was a revolution in HR, in human resources, right? Because whereas before, the people that validated the transactions were the banks, and they used to do it based on signatures, like physical wet ink signatures from a pen. And you used to, like, well, have your signature on file, and then we'll just assume that these checks are okay, and we'll just eyeball it and make sure it's all right, and then we'll just clear it. And then if there's a complaint later on, well, we'll go back and we'll edit it later. The whole thing was basically rewarding fraud, you know, more than it was honesty and veracity. And I don't know, it just feels that's back to front. That's really back to front. Let's make sure the transactions are valid from the start. And by the way, anybody, you know, with access to an internet connection and some computing hardware can become part of that validation process, rather than delegating it out based on HR and, you know, someone went to a reputable red brick and got a 2-1 in, you know, art history, so we'll give them this you know, this job in the back office at some bank. Nothing against people with 2-1s in art history. I'm sure if you went to Reading University and you got a really good degree, I'm sure you're a very intelligent person. I just mean, anyway, I'll stop there.
That's the beauty of a system like this, the beauty of cryptography. When you take all these basic primitives and you slap them together in the way they have been with Bitcoin and other similar things, it is an equilibrium of truth. You cannot go back and change things without surpassing the amount of actual physical energy put into create it in the first place. So I mean, if you take that and you scale that up to the extreme, Bitcoin on the top of the world as a reserve currency, well, that's going to be eating up I imagine, a double-digit percentage of the entire output of mankind. So if somebody wants to go back and try to cheat things or change things, well, where's that energy going to come from? We only have so much.
But I hear, swiftly moving on, that DLT, hashtag distributed ledger space, isn't ready to replace a settlement system. So maybe we just need more time.
This is actually, I kind of hate to say in a certain way, this is a very good study, and I recommend that people actually go to the bottom of this and read the actual report from the Bank of Japan and the European Central Bank. But they actually did a very well-structured, very well-thought-out analysis on how a blockchain system could fill the role of the back-end infrastructure for conventional financial services. They actually structured it very well. They went in, they selected their consensus algorithm. It's I'm kind of blanking on the name right now, but it was one of the Hyperledger protocols, I think the most recent one. And they actually set up a network with a number of nodes. They went through and they decided, okay, we're going to test throughput, and we're going to test throughput in 2 different ways. Have a constant stream of throughput, and then another stream of throughput that varied, emulating the types of up and down load that you would see in these financial institutions. Obviously, you have the peak times with higher traffic, things taper off in the lower hours. And they looked at how their nodes in the network would handle this. And then they went a step further from this. And they actually played with these different latency bars with varying numbers of nodes. So they actually went through and tested, okay, this seems to work well with, let's say we have 6 nodes, you know, distributed between Europe and Japan. Okay, what happens? How does this work if we have 40? And they actually quantified the different levels in latency, looking at varying user loads, varying numbers of nodes that they're running. And they even went a step further and started playing with the relative connection in terms of network latency between each individual node. They really went in depth here and started tweaking with every little variable to see how it would affect the performance of the system. They also went on. This is this graph right here is actually the graph of the different latencies based on user load. I think the top one is just a contract that is nothing but just a conventional send, and then the one below that is actually with a more complicated smart contract to kind of find the most optimal times to settle each transaction. So it would go through and kind of have a priority listing. And one of the most interesting things that I think about this study, I think if you go down a little further, Chris, this right here, yes. This graph right here, that light blue bar, the longest ones, this is essentially the steps contributing to the latency, the initial receipt of a transaction, when it started running contracts versus the last one it received. And that biggest bar is actually the execution of the contract that is moving the balance from one party to another. And as you can see, by far, the actual local execution of the contract itself that is moving the funds is the biggest factor in the latency here. So, I mean, like latency as far as network connection is a big factor. You know, throughput on the network level is a big factor. But the biggest bottleneck here was actually the local execution of that contract, because obviously they have to check it before they go, okay, this is good, and pass it on to the next person. And essentially what they did was establish a nice number where they looked at between 6 to 60 nodes with all of these varying factors, and noted an average latency of, I believe, 0.6 seconds at the low end and up to 1.6 seconds at the high end. So that they didn't jump into blockchain fever. Let's put it on a blockchain. They actually went through and tested this. And this kind of shows that, you know, these kinds of technologies do have a place. They do have a niche of conventional services, but they are not a competition or a threat for something like Bitcoin. They are not something that can offer uncensorability, total sovereignty. It's simply taking cryptographic primitives and applying them to a conventional database. And it's a kind of callback, G-Willikers, you're not sure what I'm saying, but over the past couple of days, like most of the topics we've been touching on are dealing with different regulations coming into play, different degrees of governments getting involved in subsidizing aspects of the cryptocurrency system. And a lot of it is kind of hedging into existing open systems, and a lot of talk about just doing their own private ones. Well, here is an actual test done on, well, can we build a private one? And yeah, this graph right here is actually the test to see what would happen in the performance of the overall system if a node was to drop offline, how long it could stay offline, and then how much time it would take to catch up. And again, that wasn't really that big. It comes back to the actual execution of the contract locally on the node as the biggest bottleneck. And this goes to show, like, you might find some use for this, but as far as a big open system that all of these different nations and big corporations can kind of play ball on as a neutral ground, it's not going to be these private systems they can build, because it carries over inefficiencies. Like, Bitcoin is efficient in the sense that, hey, we get the thing out of it that nobody can take away, nobody can shut down. But in terms of just throughput, it's not efficient. In terms of raw scalability of that throughput, it's not efficient. And unless your primary goal out of these systems is to have that neutral ground where everybody can play and no one person is in control, it's not going to do the job. So at the end of the day, we might see this technology taken and transplanted and used in more conventional places, but it's not going to be able to fill the role that Bitcoin or other open systems will as a public backbone for those types of walled gardens to interact with.
Yeah, I think this is an amazing report. I think that in terms of like the empirical data and the scientific rigor that's gone into it, we should have seen more of this from internally, like, you know, from developers in this space and anyone who tried to, create a competing client. And I find these numbers really interesting.
Yeah, they're too busy trying to build things that can't be shut down.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, even the people that were trying to set up the competing systems, the Bitcoin XTs, the classics, Bitcoin Unlimited, I never really saw that much empirical data. I heard anecdotal, like, oh, I had my node was attacked by a bunch of Tor exit nodes. I think we should restructure the way we do the ban list. And I'm like, well, that's not empirical. Show me the log file. Show me the debug log, you know.
Peter Rezoon says that we can do 50 megabyte blocks, no problems, totally fine.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
I'm pretty sure Craig Wright says that we could do gigabyte blocks, no problem.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let us know what you think in the comments in the chat. Max Kaiser. Max Kaiser's like not the Max Kaiser. Somebody who's like hogging his name on YouTube has been talking a lot in the chat room. I know what he's saying. Something about the Rothschilds. All good.
He's essentially been saying what happens if we find out Bitcoin was developed by the Rothschilds or some other group like that. Well, my response is we stole it. It's ours now. Too bad. Bye-bye.
Has all those sound money principles built into it, but it doesn't weigh you down the way gold does. All right. ICOs. Let's pump some ICOs, guys. I feel like pumping some scams. Should we pump this Isle of Man thing that apparently they can do the opposite of China?
Yeah, it looks like they're attempting to use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as a route to make real estate investments. And like I said the other day with Russia looking to have an ICO to fund mining operations and actually utilize a nice regulatory framework to legalize it, it seems the Isle of Man is doing the same. And like ultimately, to kind of push things in a little positive note, this kind of stuff is why I don't think Bitcoin or any of these open systems are really threatened in the long term. You see all of these big countries like the United States and China clamping down. This is illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Well, on the other hand, now we have the places going, okay, you don't want that money? Here, come here. We'll let you do this here. We'll legalize it. We'll regulate it. We'll let you play ball. We'll take that money. And in every way that a country can be scared that these types of systems will steal control away from them, and they'll try to clamp down and stomp it out of existence, somebody else, an underdog perhaps, is going to look at that as an opportunity to benefit themselves, and they won't try to stomp it out. They'll let it in. They'll let it grow, because they'll see the benefit that it offers them against the incumbent giants that are trying to stomp these systems out to maintain their monopoly hold.
Yeah, I think that the Chinese banning ICOs was really about, preventing Chinese, run ICOs taking money unlawfully off of other Chinese citizens. The ones that were listed in the report and some of the more nuanced responses to it after it came out. That list, I hadn't really heard of any of those ICOs. It wasn't targeted. It wasn't specifically naming any of the famous ones that I think that the world knows. And I think Isle of Man now, which is a small sort of state that exists in the British Isles between Ireland and England, is one of those states that has, it needs to appeal to gambling, it needs to appeal to, finance, because it doesn't have a large citizenry, it doesn't have a large taxpayer base. So in order to pay for its operations, it has to solicit, the kind of activities that we would commonly associate with, Luxembourg or Switzerland or Panama or one of these kinds of entities. So they've seen an opportunity, and this is jurisdictional arbitrage. This is where, the real power exists, as I've said before, in that sort of barrier between states, between those lines that men and conquerors in history have drawn on bits of paper and said, this is mine, I'm sovereign of this particular piece of land over here. And I think now you see this kind of PR warfare where all the jurisdictions are competing with regulation and trying to compete for those tax dollars and competing for that business, to get those business, like we said yesterday, like countries are blocks of companies, and you want to compete for those companies to domicile themselves in your jurisdiction, even if it's a PO box. You can do a lot more efficiently if you just set up a PO box in the British Virgin Islands, and you don't actually have to have people living in your territory. The territory and the expansiveness of that land almost becomes a liability if there's too much of it. Like Russia, it's just too damn big, and a lot of it's just a barren tundra, it's just ice. And it's just like, you've got to service this, then you've got to look after these citizens, you're kind of accountable to them because you're taxing them. So I think maybe these smaller nation states are going to have an advantage going in the future. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how widely read the sovereign individual is in this space. I hope very much so. But one of the points in the book they make when looking at pretty much how technology is going to shape the evolution of social structures, of the economy, of just personal freedom and sovereignty, they dissected different models of how a government can work. And essentially, like, what it's supposed to be is it's a service provider. I am a customer of my government. I am supposed to give them something and get something of value in exchange for that. And one of the problem with a lot of bigger governments is that they build up big bureaucracies. They expand enormously to the point where you have all of these autonomous hands going around doing things that the other hands don't know about. And the way it was put in the book is it's a government run by the employees for the employees. And when you have something that you exist under, you work for, that pays your bills, are you ever going to vote or push that in a direction to downsize it? Put yourself at risk for losing your income, your position? No. You're going to keep making it get bigger. You're going to push it in the direction where you have a greater job security, you have more income. And a lot of these smaller places, they're not that big. They don't have those big bureaucratic machines just rolling forward on their own momentum. They actually do have to compete. They have to draw people to them and offer something of value. And cryptocurrencies are a means with enormous potential for them to do so at a scale that I don't think would have been possible without them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And what those large nation states often create are big systems like central banks. And what happens is people can resign. What happens when they resign?
Well, it obviously completely throws out of whack the momentum. I mean, people have their role in an organization. They have their input, what they want to see out of it, the programs they want to institute, the direction they want to take it. And when you have people move out of that, that leaves a vacuum, it leaves a hole, it leaves that uncertainty. And it creates that thing for everybody else with their own directions, their own ideas to start fighting over. And it destabilizes things.
Mm. But now you can do like a sweepstake and you can like bet on who you think is going to replace that person, right?
The beauty of crypto-fueled prediction markets.
We should do that. Like, we should set up a prediction market for this. But yeah, we are of course alluding to the fact that there has been a resignation at the is it the Federal Reserve? Yeah, Federal Reserve. And yeah, it was written to Donald Trump. And I love it. I love that they've shown us a scan of the actual. Shame it wasn't handwritten. I don't know why everything has to be typed out. He's probably had his secretary do it and just signs the damn thing. The legacy system, eh? With all its idiosyncrasies.
I don't think I can remember the last time I've signed my name to a piece of paper.
Yeah, me neither. Right. Do we want to quickly go to the chat room? And all right, what trolling do we have today? Lieberland. Okay, so G Willikers, sorry, brings up Lieberland. I don't know that that's like the perfect example, because when I met the guy that was like running it, it was like stuck between Croatia and Serbia, right? And they all had to like carry guns because it was in the middle of like a contested area. And they've basically taken advantage of the fact that this was, disputed territory. And I didn't ever go there. I know people that did, yeah. And it was so dangerous to get there because you were, risking your life for at least some of it. I don't know how it's currently going. whether they've had any.
Yeah, the last thing I read on Liberland, it seemed like they were playing a game of hide and seek with the police on the borderlands, trying to sneak in with tents. We're gonna sneak out of the house and go camping in the backyard.
They take boats. They take boats together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it requires going on boat.
But I mean, I love this. I love the spirit of it, but it's not the way.
It's a scam
to get to the goalpost. You're not going to build a new community, a new social hierarchy or organization just by going to some little plot of land in the middle of nowhere, slapping your flag down and going, "This is mine now." I mean, that's where these problems come from in the first place. It's not going to be a person at the top staking claim to something and bringing people over. It's going to be communities just filling in the gaps where your government falls short, where they don't accomplish something. People step in and do it. And
yeah,
it's going to be slow and gradual.
Yeah, you can't really build communities from scratch. I think you have to communities form around common need. And I think there's a lot of sort of romanticizing around the community and for the love of the community. But you have to remember, communities form around all kinds of things, not just positive things, around negative things too. People get together. I mean, there are forums on the internet where people go to, learn how to commit suicide, for example. There are forums where people, 4chan, right? Like a lot of people don't agree with half the stuff that goes on there. That's a community too, right? So it's not like, oh, it's a good, community is such a good thing. A community, people come together because they share a common need and they need one another. And so they form common unity, coexistence. And I think when you put your flag in the ground and you get a gun, basically it's this hyper-nationalization. Now we're just creating more nation states. The word nation, by the way, comes from the word natality. It just means to be born. It doesn't have to be a state per se. But I find that that's inherently what ends up being created. And it's not necessarily the size of the state that's the problem, or, the community around it's the problem. It's the structure. It's the fact that daddy knows best and everyone is taught to be passive and to outsource all their decision making to a politician who's going to apparently represent their views in something called a parliament. We have to rethink these things from the ground up. I would like to see, a population of educated people that are, critical thinkers. And as I said yesterday, confident, independent, critical thinkers, preferably, rather than just assuming that everyone's idiots. Oh, the whole world's a Ponzi scheme. Oh, fuck it. Oh, this fuck it mentality. I've had enough. There's no point to life. It's all just Darwin, survival of the fittest. Fuck it. Fuck it. I don't want to put in any. I want to put in the minimum amount of effort for the maximum amount of reward. I want to maybe win more than I lose in life. Basically play out for a draw and play out for time and hope that my death isn't, horrible and painful, and in the meantime, if I can just be a little bit happy, that'd be great, and just take whatever drugs, stimulants, whatever I need.
One real quick thing on the subject of nations. I'm sure this might be misinterpreted by some, but I hope you dig through to the greater point. But in the biblical sense, Israel, and not the country with borders today, but the nation of Israel, as defined biblically, it wasn't a plot of land. It wasn't a line anywhere. It was the people, the community. That's what the nation of Israel meant in that context.
Yeah, let's talk about religion next. Up next.
Oh God, what did I do?
I won't say it. I won't go on because I'm trying to keep this show short today. But I will say that this notion that daddy knows best, and there's a couple of you in the chat room that are picking up on it. At some point, when I was young, or when let's say when one is young, daddy is an expert. Daddy knows everything. But then at some point, you grow up and you realize daddy was a fucking idiot. And you realize actually that maybe your parents, mother or father, weren't as smart as you thought. Of course, when you're a child, from your perspective, the adult has the ability to understand you more than you have the ability to understand them because they've just been around for longer, right? It's what leads to the gerontocracy, this idea that The old people have more wealth, have more knowledge by virtue of being around for longer. But you constantly have this influx of youth, this really powerful energy that brings with it an intuition and a body of ideas that are often anathema and rejected by that gerontocracy, by that older. And they oftentimes, the way a person with power in a relationship uses that power really sets out their character and colors and paints a picture for us of who that person really is. To have power and to not use it, even if you are faced with a threat, even if you are faced with something that challenges ideas and virtues that you've held true, before really taking the opportunity to look inside of yourself and to check whether this intuition, this youth that is before you, may be a purer form of truth, because they're not bogged down with experiences and biases that come from some of those experiences and those ill-formed beliefs that maybe have formed through bad judgment or bad, thinking. After one can have an experience, one can often leave that experience with the wrong lesson. And so I think the youth does bring with it a purity of thought that I think can often challenge the older generations, and the older generations can sometimes fall back on their power of wealth and of social networks and those kinds of things. And I think to be able to keep that balance in check, that balance of power in check, is a good thing. And I think you're seeing that expression right now with the technorati, the younger people coming through that know how to code and know how to use this technology almost intuitively, really. Okay, final thoughts. Sorry, I rambled. Got the ranties again.
It was music to my ears, Chris.
Mr. Oddle, any final thoughts?
Just ignore the noise and keep the eye on the prize. That's about it. Everything, there's a lot of noise out there. Ignore it.
Great. Well, guys, you can check the description. Please join us on the Mumble. We'd be glad to have you. More people joining every day. They watch the YouTube, they come in, they want to see what's going on and checking out. And then you yourself can be a part of this process. We have a news desk, a living organism where people can put in suggestions for stories that we cover on the show, and people collaborate on coming up with the images that we use on social media to promote them, and you come up with show titles and stuff. This is a community and a place where people can come with a common need to actually contribute something. Crowdsourcing the news generation fuel, not something that comes top down. It's a heterarchy. And with that, I will say you can like and subscribe to this show, but only if you want to. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.